Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second podcast of the season for the second round in Melbourne, which is in support of the F1. Across the weekend, we had four races, with all of them basically being sprint races. And today, I'm fortunate enough to have a guest with me in the form of Shane. How you going, Shane?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Would you like to give us a bit of an introduction to yourself?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been a fan of Supercars since I was in late high school, so about early 2000s, and for pretty much that entire time, I've been a Ford fan. So I tried to be a little bit less one-eyed these days, but yeah, usually the blue oval's pretty strong with me.
So you would have been Ambrose back in the day then.
Yeah, he was the first one I was a big fan of, but it's pretty much it doesn't matter who's in the cars as long as they're racing blue ovals. That's who I've usually gone for.
Oh, that's great. Well, let's just jump into it. Basically, from Thursday, from the first practice session, the Mustangs were quick, like they had been in the previous weekend. Um, it was it was a bit interesting. The commentators brought it up. They were talking about how most of the teams have to relearn how to set up for certain tracks due to the springs changing. So obviously that throws up some interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Triple Eight were probably the team that was caught off guard the most, surprisingly. That usually with them having, um, a lot of technology behind them, a lot of experience. I thought that they would have been even straight on the ball back in Adelaide without too much drama at all. But they did seem to struggle a little bit in Adelaide and carried on in Melbourne Park as well.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that they saw that they were slower than a majority of the top running teams in Adelaide. Do you think they would have really invested some time in making sure they're on top of that, but they just seem to not be there?
Yeah, a little bit. I think, strangely enough, they weren't even really the fastest Holden team for a lot of the weekend as well. Like we've seen, even Hazelwood it was fairly quick throughout various parts of the weekend. I thought we would have seen more out of Erebus up to this stage of the season, but it's only been a couple of rounds, so I don't think there's too much to worry about for them just yet.
I think Brad Jones Racing have also been pretty quick as well, quite surprisingly, because they've been running the same spring setup from the previous year as well, so it's not too much of an issue for them.
Yeah, well, that's right. I think they've probably been the most consistent. They've been qualifying towards the pointy end, which is where you want to be, obviously, and they've just shown pretty solid pace right throughout.
Yeah. So in that first practice session, Van Gisbergen had splitter issues, so just more worries for Triple Eight there. Um, Only a couple drivers went for a qualifying time due to the fact that it was just such a short practice session. So it really changes the dynamic of the weekend when they've got such a short practice session. So they really haven't got much of time to set up both like a qualifying and a race kind of pace. So it makes it quite interesting.
Yeah, it certainly does. I think, because they have to work in and around what the F1 cars do, then they're obviously compromised on what they would normally do throughout the course of a regular weekend. So they've shortened practice sessions, and as we'll touch on shortly with qualifying, the qualifying sessions were very short as well and caught a lot of drivers out, including Triple Eight.
Yeah, so on to qualifying. McLaughlin basically dominated almost every single qualifying session throughout the weekend. So for that first one, it was Waters, Slade, Percat, and then Coulthard. So Coulthard isn't quite up there with McLaughlin again this season, which is interesting because he was up there in Adelaide, but then obviously just had a string of bad luck. But he just doesn't seem to be quite at the pace just yet.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that might contribute to that is, as far as I know, McLaughlin is the only one with a brand new off-the-shelf Mustang for the season. All the rest of the Mustangs running converted Falcons, which includes Coulthard's.
Yeah,
So
that could probably contribute to it.
yeah, so I think there might be a couple of things that would be contributing towards that, but he's still been right at the pointy end. It's certainly been an improvement from last season. So
Yeah, definitely. He's considering how uncomfortable he seemed in the car from last season, it is definitely an improvement, that's for sure. So Slade managed to qualify third. So, like we were talking about previously, how BJR is pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, I think the qualifying sessions didn't sync up with races
No,
one
they
through to four
didn't.
for the weekend. They did change it around a bit, which I think might have confused a few fans. It's confused us now at the
Yeah,
moment, but
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, almost he was fast all weekend, really, wasn't he?
Yeah. Mustard certainly capitalized on the speed of the Mustang. Just in the Adelaide races, I think he made a few too many mistakes, but last weekend he definitely capitalized on it, and he made really good speed most of the weekend.
Yeah, his consistency was certainly a lot better. Like he was caught out in one of the earlier qualifying sessions, but as we've seen through the race, he just stormed through the field and finished up on the podium.
Yeah, then on the final qualifying session, qualifying 4, he managed to actually beat McLaughlin, which was pretty impressive. He managed to get him right at the end of the session there, so that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Like McLaughlin's been the qualifying king for the last couple of seasons now, so anyone that can topple McLaughlin in any qualifying session's done a pretty good job.
Yeah. So on to the first race of the weekend. It was race 3 overall for the season. It was the first race on the Friday, and it was there was a pit stop they had to do. So it was a really big talking point was whether that you do an undercut or you just do a normal pit stop, or you could even overcut. And a couple people did try the undercut. It it works towards the beginning of the pit stop window, but then as it comes towards the end of the race, you just have no tires because those super softs are just not there at the end of the race at all.
Yeah, absolutely. You get certainly a nice big gain at the start, but it's sort of like a short-term gain, but a long-term loss. You sort of want to try and be the last of the stoppers. We've seen Van Gisbergen over the last few years. He's been probably one of the better drivers when it comes to managing to keep that initial set of tyres lasting longer than most of those around him. Come in, shorter fuel stop, get onto the super soft tyres, and then storm home at the end.
Yeah, I think for race 3, Van Gisbergen pitted on lap 15, so he's really stretching out that first set of tyres. It's very similar to what Red Bull has run for a majority of last season, where they'd run Van Gisbergen right towards the end of the possible pit stop window, and then they'd pit him then, and then basically hope that the tyres propel him forwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just due to those new tyres, he caught Davison really quickly because there's such a massive difference in the tyre life. So it was probably not a great decision for Davison to go for the undercut. But Van Gisbergen is just so good at saving his tyres that no one's safe, basically, once Van Gisbergen comes out of the pits. But then, unfortunately, obviously, he had that mechanical issue on lap 22, which is something we haven't seen in ages, an actual mechanical issue, which was strange.
Yeah, especially on a Triple Eight car. Like, engine failures are rare at the best of times in supercars, but for a Triple Eight especially to have a total engine failure, you just never see it these days. I think the last one I can remember, certainly from one of the top teams, would have gone back to Bathurst 2017 when McLaughlin's car failed on him going over the top of the mountain when Prema was in the car.
Yeah. Oh, that was awful. Oh, but then there was also at Bathurst, Craig Lowndes had that gearbox failure coming down the mountain when Richo was in there. So there's been a few, but it's really quite rare, and especially a transaxle issue, I think they said at the end. So very strange.
Yeah.
But I think Van Gisbergen might have possibly got into the top 5 towards the end there, because he was seriously flying, but obviously...
Yeah, well, I think he was fourth at the time, I think, when the car packed up on him. So I think certainly a third was on the cards for him if he was able to keep the pace up.
So just due to Van Gisbergen dropping out, it just ended up with 5 Mustangs in the top 5. And then what I was most impressed with was Mostert's recovery from way down the grid. He made up 17 positions, which was just ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a stormy drive.
Yeah, it's makes you wonder how well he would have gone if he qualified up towards the front of the field.
Oh, he might have lapped the field.
Yeah. So on to Saturday. We had the 1000th race for Australian Touring Car and Supercars. So a bit low key. They didn't really mention it that much, but it was one of the shorter races of the weekend. So we had, before the race even started, we had Golden got a 5-second penalty due to a driving infringement from the previous race. That was all that was really for pre-race. So since there wasn't any pit stops, really all of the battling had to be done on the track. Whincup had qualified pretty far up, so he had to really just defend from those Mustangs. And you could just tell, just by the way how much he was defending, that those Mustangs are just so much quicker around there.
Yeah, they certainly have a lot of flow going. I think the higher speed corners really play into their advantage. I think top speed's probably much of a muchness. Like you can always take a couple of k's an hour with amongst the top teams, but you could just see the way that they're going around corners and the way they come off the bumps. They just really got the car set up properly at the moment. Yeah.
Talking of setup, Coulthard also had, he still has that rear wing shake I noticed during the race. It has to do with the way that he's actually set up the car. He has more rear wing, I think, than most of the other Mustangs. Someone else had it at the same time. I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but there was 2 cars that had that rear wing shake still that was going on in Adelaide.
Yeah, I did notice it a little bit. It was certainly flapping around a bit. You'd think DJR, Team Penske are well aware of it, and that it's not going to be too much of an issue. But you'd think surely it's got to be messing with the aero a little bit if it's not the air's not flowing across that rear wing as well as it should be, and you just want to hope that it's strong enough and all of a sudden doesn't just snap in half as he's flying down the straight at a couple of 100 k's an hour, and then you turn up at turn 1 with hardly any downforce and therefore hardly any braking.
Yeah, it'll be interesting come Symmons Plains and then Bathurst, since they've got those such long straights. It'll be interesting to see whether they run a similar setup, whether they'll still have the same wing shake, because obviously going down Conrod at like almost 300 is going to be pretty scary with a wing shaking behind you. So wasn't towards the end of the race, Mustard finally gained the lost time, and he after his poor start, he managed to catch on to Waters. For that passing opportunity, Waters left a pretty big gap for Mostert, which was really lucky, because I think they would have probably collided if he didn't do that. Mostert sent it from a fairway back. But in the end, it was McLaughlin taking out the win again, and then Mostert, Waters, Whincup, Coulthard, and then Will Davison going up there in his Mustang. So he's probably pretty happy at the moment, considering the past few seasons where he hasn't been performing as he probably would like to.
Yeah, for sure. Like, he's had a pretty lean few seasons now, and he probably would have thought that maybe the mid-pack was where he was going to be consigned to from now on. But suddenly he's got a new lease of life. This new Mustang for both Tickford and DJR's going like a bit of a rocket ship at the moment, so he can certainly make hay while the sun shines, as they say.
Yeah, I think the only person that seems to be struggling a little bit at the moment with it is Lee Holdsworth in the number 5 Bottle car. But I think that's mostly just due to the him being in a new team and everything, and obviously there's the pressure just builds on him every single time that Mark Winterbottom beats him in his previous team.
Yeah.
Which happened again in this race. So it's just like a building pressure for him at the moment, I think. And he's...
I think he feels it possibly from the Ford fans that you've got to at least beat Frosty and show him there was a reason why you should have stayed with Ford. I think on that, it was a bit of a shame that we didn't see too much fanfare about it being the thousandth race, or was it the thousandth championship weekend, or across the
Oh, the
lot, or was it the
thousandth
thousandth race?
race. Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
yeah, yeah, well, thousandth race. So I would have thought there would have been a little bit more fanfare, but I guess because it fell on like a tiny little 70k race, there probably wasn't too much to get excited about. No pit stops. It wasn't going to be one of the more epic 150k races or something like what we've seen at Eastern Creek last year with the single 300k race. So I think it was just bad timing that it fell on such a tiny little race that still ultimately is a support race to Formula One.
Yeah, it's interesting because like that's like it's the 1000th race from like right at the beginning, like way back in the 60s that it's the 1000th race from. So it's not like it's a small achievement. That's like a lot of races there.
Oh, exactly. You'd think. I think again, being the fact that it was, they still got to play second fiddle to Formula One. And they've got such a tight schedule. I'm sure if it fell, last time out at Adelaide, I have no doubt they would have tried to pull as many of those, former championship winners' cars out from whichever garage or museum they're sitting in to send for a lap around the track, just show it off to the fans for a bit of
Yeah.
appreciation.
I think they probably scheduled it in and then gone, oh no, this is gonna fall on the Melbourne weekend.
Yeah, almost. It probably, maybe they should have tried to sneak Simmons planes in between Adelaide and Melbourne, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so on to race 5. Um, we had that really weird incident
Oh,
where McLaughlin and Waters went into each other during the warm up lap. That was so weird.
you
I
wouldn't
thought
read about it.
yeah, I thought I had like missed a race or something, and I'm like, wait,
Yeah,
what? Why is Waters and McLaughlin out? And then they show the footage. It's just so weird.
yeah, I know. Like, because I think they might, like, I might have just changed back onto the channel, and like they said, oh, a bit of drama here, and I think they were showing McLaughlin's Mustang in the garage at that stage, and the mechanics are underneath working on it. I thought, oh, well, it's just a couple of dramas. They're only lining up to the grid now, so he's got time. Everything's good. And then all of a sudden, the next shot was like the rest of them are getting ready to go, and I thought, well, hang
Yeah,
on, something a lot worse has happened here. Like, what is going
yeah,
on? And then there was very little footage of it to begin with. We had to really wait until the next day to see the in car from both of them to,
yeah.
to figure out what actually happened. But once we learned that, yeah, they've had it coming together. That's you don't see that these days in supercars.
It was just really weird. They were talking about how like they're overtaking on the warm up lap, and I'm just thinking, why are you doing that on the warm up lap? It's just really weird. I can't remember who they actually penalised.
I don't think they did. I think they just
They
said it
didn't
was just,
penalise anyone.
yeah, both of them just got it wrong. Like, I think Waters certainly has to carry most of the blame. He was the one trying to pass McLaughlin.
Yeah,
But and it was just a something dumb that happens. McLaughlin's
yeah,
warming up his tyres the usual way, swerving side to side. Waters just thought, oh, well, he's going slow. Waters, by the sounds of what he was saying, tends to do like a faster lap to get some heat into the tyres and into the brakes, and
yeah,
it's just like an awful breakdown of communication / vision
yeah,
that they've come together, and it's obviously cost them both a lot of championship points because up until that point for McLaughlin, he had been undefeated, and Waters had certainly been collecting some podiums and some pretty good results up until that point. So it was a certainly an incident that'll hurt them in the long run.
It's probably certainly going to be one of those incidents that they're going to put in one of those compilations where they're like 5 weird incidents from the past or something like
Oh,
that.
it'll be on the Supercars blooper reel for many years yet, I think.
Yeah, McLaughlin's going to regret that. Oh, well, more like Waters is going to regret that for years.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially seeing as how he's had a really good year up until this year. Like I was starting to think, like, is he really going to be one of the top drivers in the sport? Like, I thought you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt. The Tickford Falcons just weren't going that fast. Like, Mostert was doing a great job last year, but the rest of them just were really nowhere. And but this year he's come out and you could probably almost argue he's been the best of the Tickford runners so far.
Oh, yeah. I think if Mostert didn't make as many mistakes as he did in Adelaide, he probably would be Mostert will probably be the top Tickford runner, but just Cameron Waters just being consistent. So on to the actual race. Only 22 cars started because Waters and McLaughlin took each other out. It was a Brad Jones Racing front row in quotation marks because they were in the second row.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was a lot of pressure on Brad Jones Racing to make a really good start and try go for the 1-2, but Whincup was right there and he was ready to put the pressure on them straight away. But then there was just that really stupid accident after Whincup had passed them where the two BJR cars just crashed into each other, where they I think it was coming around the last corner.
Yeah, I think it was turn 15, coming out of turn 15 into 16, I think it was.
Yeah, they just crashed into each other where they really just shouldn't have. They should have just worked together.
I think at that time a bit of teamwork. Let's go back and try and chase Whincup down. We'll get some, at least at the very least get both cars on the podium. But I think they just both had a bit of white line fever and thought, oh wow, we can win this race, and they just forgot that they're both in the same team and just went for it. And but again, those things happen in racing, so they probably would have copped just as much blame if they just played nice and just followed each other around without trying to push each other too hard either. So I'm just happy to see some, whenever you see a bit of rubbing and a bit of bumping off the circuit, it always adds to the entertainment anyway. So.
It was just so ridiculous. Like Whincup's just gone past both of them, and then you just see both of them make contact. It's like, come on.
Yeah, well that's it. Like and like me being a Ford fan, I thought, well, as long as it's anyone but Whincup, I'll be happy. So when I seen both Brad Jones cars suddenly find themselves going a little bit further backwards, I thought, oh, that happens. But I just figured. But I honestly thought from there Whincup would actually go on with it a little bit. But as we've seen, he got hauled in still.
Yeah. So Mostert was just quick after those pit stops. He was just catching him so incredibly quickly. So we could see really how much pace he did actually have, even towards the front of the field. He was just catching him so incredibly quickly. But then he got past him before that safety car, and that another really weird incident with Van Gisbergen just having a wheel coming flying off. So just no luck for Van Gisbergen this weekend.
Oh yeah, well, as the old rule goes, if there was no such thing as bad luck, you'd have no luck at all.
Yeah, it's just I just saw the incident as he came out of the second corner, I think it was. And he just had that wheel just come straight off, and it just went from bad to worse.
Yeah, but the strange thing was, I don't think that was straight after the pit stop either. I think that was still 2 or 3 laps after he stopped. So it's a strange one. I think I'm pretty sure it was. I might be wrong, but I thought that I'd seen him pit a couple of laps earlier, and then
Van Gisbergen pitted on lap 15, and the safety car was on lap 20, so he would have been like lap 19 that the wheel came off. So
yeah,
it was a few
that's
laps.
right. It was a few laps, which is sort of similar to what happened to Whincup's car last year at Bathurst, where just out of nowhere suddenly the wheel comes off and that's the end of their race. So it's a strange one there. And we've seen they had a couple of dramas in Adelaide with pit stops, where they had the hose come off the just suddenly started flailing around wildly, and then even something like that, just on the audio coming through the TV, the wheel guns made a totally different sound to any of the other teams. It was something completely different. So I don't know if there's something to do with whatever their setup is, if it's different to any other teams that's giving them a bit of grief. I don't know if there's the advantage. I'm sure that they must have found an advantage there somewhere, but whether the downside to that is they've suddenly had a couple of these incidents with wheels coming off the car that's certainly hurt them.
So then we had that safety car deployed on lap 20. And there was a couple guys that took a second pit stop just to try and get some fresher tyres on. So we had Kelly, De Silvestro and Stenway all took a second pit stop under that safety car. It was a pretty short safety car. They just obviously just needed to get rid of that wheel, and then they had a place to bury the car just behind where he was, so that was lucky. So Mostert had a really good restart, but it just seemed like Whincup was just like asleep coming onto the restart. He wasn't even aware that there was a restart occurring because he just fell back But then Mostert finally took a win since McLaughlin wasn't there to snatch it away from him. So it went Mostert, Whincup, and then Slade. So Brad Jones Racing getting onto the podium again, which is a pretty good result for them.
Yeah, it's not too often that we see Brad Jones Racing get a podium, so it's certainly a good result for them, and I'm sure that they'll certainly be hoping for a few more of those throughout the season.
I hope that they will get a few more because it's great to see another team come up to the top.
Yeah, it's always
and
good to see the underdogs get up.
So we had that incident between Richie Stenaway and Lee Holdsworth. It was a little bit difficult to get any footage of it, so it's a bit difficult to judge. But we've had the first disqualification of the season in that race with Richie Stenaway being disqualified for the incident with Lee Holdsworth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Richie Stanaway was probably shortest odds to actually be the first disqualification for the year, but I didn't see any footage of what actually happened for that one, so it was a little bit strange, but certainly Holdsworth, who's usually one of the most placid guys on the grid, he was blowing up the Lux. He went and found Stanaway in the Walkinshaw Andretti United garage, and it was certainly a bit of push and shove, and he certainly let him know how he felt anyway.
Yeah, and then I think it was due to what Richie actually said, because it sounded like he was like trying to give payback to Holdsworth for some previous incident. Obviously, it's a little bit indecipherable because we don't know all the incidents that go on. But then after the weekend, Boost Mobile said that they're going to pay the $10,000 for Richie Stenaway.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I'm not sure what they're getting at, but I guess that's for a lot of those ones where a driver gets the fine, either the team or perhaps the sponsor comes forward and pays the money. I think Boost Mobile are just happy to have someone fiery in the car pushing hard. Stanaway, he's certainly a bloke that's had plenty of talent. Former GP2 racer in the main support category to Formula One. I'm pretty sure he won a race or two in there as well as some podiums. And when he made his debut in Supercars racing with Waters at Sandown, they won that race. They led for a huge chunk of Bathurst that following race. And then when he joined the team last year full time, suddenly it was like a totally different driver rocked up, and he just found himself either last or very close to last. And if he wasn't happy, or we seen him at Townsville he was drifting his way around the circuit. And he just suddenly came across as being he started to gain that reputation amongst fans and perhaps even some of the drivers that it was just a bit of a brat, and that just thought that he might have had that little bit of entitlement to do a bit better, and he very well could have it, but you still got to do the right thing by the team. And now he's at Walkinshaw Andretti United, and it's strange. Like you could argue that it's a better car, or perhaps at least equal to what Tickford had last year, and the results still haven't been there so far for him anyway.
Yeah, and I think Boost Mobile had actually previously paid a fine for someone else last year, so it's certainly not the first time they've done this for someone.
Sorry, he's not with Walkinshaw. He's with.
It's with GRM.
He's with GRM. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah, I'll keep thinking of Boost cars because Boost are on the Walkinshaw cars last year.
All the sponsorship changing over is weird.
I still see Bottle car and think, that's with the bottom. Not anymore.
So on to race 6. So obviously Stenaway was starting from last due to that penalty that he got. It was the final race for the weekend. Van Gisbergen and Coulthard made that contact coming out of after Van Gisbergen cut the corner coming to 13, and then they made contact coming into 14. It was just so stupid. It was just a really weird situation by Van Gisbergen. It was like he was readdressing, but he was still trying to challenge him for the position, which is really weird. I think if he was attempting to readdress it, he should have just let him go past, like brake a lot earlier than what he did, let Coulthard go back past again, try and redo the move again after that.
Yeah, because it was pretty obvious going into the chicane that Coulthard had the move done. Van Gisbergen's kept the boot in. He's had to take the shortcut, which we've seen plenty of times before, and usually it just means that, okay, well, I have to concede. Coulthard's got the place. He's got a fairly long bit of straight to try and fall in behind Coulthard, but I think all he was trying to do was let Coulthard's bonnet be back in front again, and then thought, oh, maybe I've let him back through. We're back to where we were. I'll try and outbreak him down to 14 now, and it didn't work. He locked up and bumped him off the circuit. And I think it ended up hurting Coulthard worse by the end because he plummeted right down the back of the field.
Oh yeah, it was just a very strange incident, and then the Jones incident after he was trying to pass Di Silvestro coming into 12, and then Di Silvestro is slow coming out of turn 12, and Jacobson went to that inside. Sorry, Jones went to the inside, and then Jacobson went to the right hand side at the same time and just pitched him straight into that wall. It was such a massive accident. It's just awful to see such a huge accident and such a weird spot as well for an accident.
Yeah, we don't see too many accidents there, which obviously why it's just a straight up concrete wall, and it certainly folded that car in half. It was certainly lost. It was the back end, I think, that he went in. Oh no, it was front end first. I think that he went in.
Yeah.
And certainly a hefty repair bill waiting for the team.
So then we had that safety car deployed at lap 4, so a short race was shortened to even something shorter.
Yeah.
So after the massive cleanup that the volunteers had to do, we had about 6 laps remaining. And then it was revealed that Van Gisbergen was going to get that 15-second time penalty, which I think is fair enough for what he did to Coulthard. And it was just... Yeah, I think that's a fair enough judgment considering what happened there.
Yeah, I think it's about on par with what you would expect Supercars to give. If they had given him a drive-through, with that being the pit lane that's double the length of any normal pit lane that we see, it would have been a near 45-second one. And some might argue that perhaps a little bit more time, at least enough to perhaps fall behind Coulthard, would have been more appropriate, but you still got to stay consistent within what we see in Supercars. So I think 15 seconds is about right on the money.
So Mostert was still not able to catch McLaughlin throughout the race, despite the fact that they even had a safety car through there throughout the race. So it just seems as though the speed rankings at the moment are like McLaughlin and then Mostert and then possibly Coulthard if he doesn't have such bad luck during these races. Yeah, so the podium for that race was McLaughlin, Mostert, Whincup, and then Waters, and then Davison up there again, followed by Winterbottom. So Winterbottom had a good performance right towards the end there.
Yeah, I think Frosty certainly, since switching over to Team 18, he's been a bit of a surprise. Like he's been keeping that car fairly consistently in the top 10, and you'd think it might only be a matter of time before he finds himself up on the podium, perhaps even the top step. I think a lot of people didn't, like I certainly didn't see it coming straight away. I thought perhaps by season's end he might find himself a little bit further up, but he's certainly found his mojo again, that's for sure.
So for the Larry Perkins Trophy, which was the basically round points in back in the old days, we had Mostert, Whincup, Coulthard, and then Slade. So Slade getting up there, he's being quite consistent throughout the whole weekend. Obviously Mostert was up there basically because he capitalised on the fact that McLaughlin wasn't there in the second to last race. But McLaughlin came out of the weekend on top, followed by Whincup, Mostert, and then Will Davison. So Will Davison's been the quiet achiever throughout the last 2 rounds, which has been pretty impressive.
Yeah, he's just been collecting consistent, good finishes so far this year. We've only seen the 6 races so far, but certainly you want to get off to a good start. McLaughlin, he's just been the outstanding, the top performer so far. Like he's won every race he started. We just had that one DNF, or did not start along the way. And that Waters right up there, but a couple of poor results for him. Same with Coulthard. If he's finished well, he's been up to pointy end. But then he's had a lot of bad luck along the way too. So, but yeah, certainly McLaughlin and Chaz Mostert have been the best drivers so far this season, largely due to car speed. But certainly their talents are probably still what's winning out overall.
Hmm. So that that wraps up the race part of this podcast. So on to a couple other talking points that have come out throughout the week. We've had time certain races are now no longer a thing, which I think is a pretty good choice, but it also could throw up a couple issues with finishing races at like 8 o'clock at night. That's all I'm concerned about, really.
Yeah, I think if they might start pushing some races a little bit further forward, that they think, like we've seen what happened at the Gold Coast last year, that huge storm rolled in on the Sunday afternoon. We only got a handful of laps of green flag racing, and then the rain started. We had red, and they were behind the safety car. It just wasn't going to work. So I think we might see some races move forward a little bit with their starting time. I don't know if it's just a completely unlimited when the race finishes. It finishes. They might still have to have a limit on where it goes. But I think we've seen a lot of races over the years where it goes time certain and they cut 1 or 2 laps off. I think leaving those extra couple of laps go, like letting them run, I think it's better for the sport, better for the fans. You get to see the whole, however many laps are in that race. You don't get to feel ripped off because of a couple of safety cars or a red flag along the way. So I think overall it's definitely a good move from Supercars to do that.
It just means like the enduros like Bathurst and Sandown there, if there's like incident ridden race, I think it's gonna be a pretty long day for some viewers, but I think most people will be pretty passionate about keeping that in there.
Oh yeah, especially something like Bathurst. It's usually the day you get a few of the mates around and light the barbecue up and enjoy a few beers. So if it means you can sneak 1 or 2 more in before the checkered flag comes out, I think you've done well.
I don't think we've had a time certain Bathurst. I'm more concerned about the Sandown, because we've had a couple Sandowns in the past where it's been shortened quite a lot. I also think they have that noise curfew in Sandown, but they must be working around that somehow. Probably starting the race earlier in the day.
Yeah. I think that's more likely what they're getting at, is that they might start the race at just that extra half an hour early. That might just allow them to have a little bit more time to race if they needed to. But again, I think for Bathurst, they must have a fairly generous amount past just being Bathurst. They must just allow them that extra time if need be. Because I can't remember a time certain race for Bathurst.
That would be blasphemy, cutting Bathurst short.
Oh yeah, because it just wouldn't be the 1,000 then. You need the 1,000 kilometres.
Yeah, it's when I was in Bathurst for the 12-hour, I was talking to one of the residents, and they said that basically all of the residents that live on the circuit now have an alternative access rather than the circuit. So they have like a residence access during the 12-hour practices and qualifying from like Thursday to Saturday. So they have like a resident access time. Barely anyone goes on the circuit because they all have a second access anyway. So they don't really care anymore.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I think it's mainly just the tourists that head up around the mountain.
Yeah. So on to your favourite issue, the parity issues that have been brought up. People saying that the Mustangs are too fast.
Yeah, well,
they're too fast.
Oh well, I'll be completely naive to say that they don't have a clear advantage at the moment. But the funny thing is, I don't think you can slow them down. Because where do you stop? If you were you're trying to say, we can try and take a little bit of rear wing off, like some of the rear wing end plate, try and slow them down a couple of tenths, but you're never going to get that accurate. And like I said, do you stop once they're slower than some of the Holden teams, or it's if anything, I'm all for allowing the Holden teams, especially like Triple Eight being the homologation team for the ZB, to redesign a rear wing that have bigger rear wing end plates if they think that's where the big advantage is. I know Triple Eight, DJR were caught out with they had the 30-something kilo muffler underneath the car, where normally it would only be around the 4 to 5 kilo mark, and they were they didn't ping them from anything. They were just asked to change that going into Adelaide, into Albert Park, which is probably fair because you can obviously see that by having that extra 25, 30 kilos, only a matter of a few inches off the ground, is going to improve the centre of gravity. And that's where we seen a big advantage with the ZB last year, was that in Adelaide they had the composite panels right the way around the car. The Altimas and the Falcons are still running this regular panels around for a lot of the car. And that's all, Ford weren't looking at Holden to say, oh, we need the ZB slowed down. They just wanted the chance to make the same composite panels just so they can even it up a little bit. And I think that's, for me, I think all this, you got Roland Dane especially, he's probably been the biggest advocate behind it, saying, oh, they've got too much of an advantage, it's an unfair advantage, we've got to, I don't think he's actually come out and said we need to slow them down, but there's been a few, especially the keyboard warriors on Facebook that have said that the car's got to be slowed down, but you just can't. I think you've just got to allow Holden the chance to even it up, and then maybe next year they say, oh, well, okay, well, we now have a regulation on the maximum area that the rear wing end plates can be, and then press on from there.
Yeah, also, it's interesting because like the Commodores came out, the ZB came out last year, and they had that massive rear wing, and everyone's like, why do they have such a massive rear wing? And then they say that the Mustang wing is so big, we're just going to end up with wings that are just so massive unless we have regulations on them, obviously.
Yeah, they'll start to look like those tuner cars on the Cars films.
Yeah. But I think like the Commodores are still competitive with the Mustangs. Like, they've got an advantage, but it's not too much different to what happened when they released the ZB last year. The ZB, I think, was more dominating than what the Mustang is at the moment.
So far, like the Mustang, they've won the first 6 races, but we haven't seen them clean sweep every podium. We haven't.
Yeah.
Obviously, we had one race where they finished 1 through to 5, but with a few laps to go, Van Gisbergen was in 4th and closing in on 3rd, so he very well could have got a podium that day. At the very worst, it would have been a 4th place finish, you would have thought, because he had the better tyres. So like they're not eons off the pace. I think Triple Eight, like we said earlier, with the new springs, it's hurt them more than I think they anticipated. Brad Jones have probably been able to capitalise on that. I think certainly Erebus have seemed to have taken a step back so far this year, but I think it's just a combination of the Mustang is definitely an improvement over the FGX Falcon from last year, and then Triple Eight have had a tough start to the season, which has just made the situation look worse than what it really is. I think given 2 or 3 more rounds, we might see that even back up. I think the ZB won like 8 or 9 or 8 of the first 9 races last season, and we've only got it. Like I remember Sandown last year. Like if it wasn't for a safety car, Triple Eight would have lapped the field. I would have thought.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Like they were just that fast. I thought, well, what have they
Wingcop
found?
and Debrel were just ridiculous down that back straight.
Oh,
it was just, we'll see you later.
Yeah.
It's interesting that people are like worried about parity so much in this category though, whereas you like look at other categories like F1, which was on that weekend, where there's just like 3 teams that are miles in front of everyone else, and it's just like battle for the rest towards the back. It's like we've got quite a close competition here, but as soon as like someone like wins the first few races, everyone jumps on it saying they're too quick. It's like maybe it's just the dominating era of the Mustang this time. We don't even know yet. Like it's been the Commodore for the last years now.
Yeah, well, that's right.
I think it's just like
if the Mustang was to go through the season undefeated, which it won't happen. Like it just like the laws of averages will stop it from winning every race. You would think. Yeah,
exactly.
Like even Mercedes, like right throughout the last few years that they've been dominating Formula One. Like especially 2014, the first year of it, they were a second faster than everybody else, but they still didn't win every race. Ricciardo still managed to win 3 races that year. Had a fair bit of luck go his way for them, but they still didn't win. Like they didn't get every pole. Massa managed to sneak a pole in, I think, in Austria that season. So so unless we see the Mustangs absolutely dominate the season and win just about everything, and win it by margin, I don't think it's too early to tell whether we're going to see anything like that. And if we do, I'm more than happy for them to go back and say, hang on, we need to have a look at this again, and we need to redesign something. Or again, like I'm more than happy for the Triple Eight being the homologation team to, and for Supercars to allow them to make a new rear wing if they think that there's an advantage in that.
Yeah. Well, that just about wraps it up now. Thank you very much, Shane, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No worries, it was my pleasure.
Next race is Symmons Plains. Obviously, that has the potential to throw up some interesting results. Obviously, they had that massive accident a few years ago, which was just terrifying. And also, they also have some very interesting weather there, potentially. But yeah, thank you all very much for listening, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.